Love your books. Love what you love. Who cares? Just read what you want to read, guys. These I like reading. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about some tips for getting back into reading if you're in a reading slump, or just some tips to actually kind of get back into reading at all, period. I have a lot of friends who tell me, oh man, like I wish I could get back into reading, like I wish I read more, I just like can't seem to get interested, or you know, whatever it is. And I actually do have some opinions on this. I feel like I have some good tips, at least that I have used in the past for myself to kind of get myself back interested and back into reading again. So I just wanted to share those with you guys today. Just disclaimer, if I am like looking off to the side, it's because I actually do have some notes on the side, because I really want to like get this right. Yeah, so let's go ahead and chat. We're gonna start out with 3 major tips on how to get you back into reading, and then I'm gonna follow that up a little bit with some actual things that you can implement in your life when you're actually trying to start getting back into reading. So to start out, let's delve into tip number 1. If you want to get back into reading, you need to figure out why you want to get back into reading. That may sound silly, but for instance, if you're saying that you want to get back into reading, or you want to start reading, or you want to read more, or whatever it is, and your reasoning behind that is just because you feel like you have to, you're not going to be as motivated to do it. Reading is something that is a way of connecting with a book or with a poem or whatever it may be. And if you're not feeling that like genuine connection, it's not going to last. It's important to recognize that if you want to get back into reading, you need to want that for a meaningful reason. Like, I want to be able to learn more about said thing, or I want to connect more with these sorts of stories, or I want to escape the world for a little bit, or I want to just become a better reader. That's also a very valid reason to want to get back into reading. But if your reasoning is just like, oh, everybody else seems to be doing it, maybe I should too. The important thing is just to connect with your reason and make sure that it's something that's actually personal to you and doesn't have too much to do with what everybody else is doing, because you're going to have to come back to that reason if it's something that you're struggling with. And if it's not a good reason, you're gonna kind of lose it. It's gonna run away from you, okay? Okay, tip number 2. You need to figure out what books you like. So if you're gonna get back into reading, or if you're gonna start reading a lot more, one of the most important things to keep you interested in your reading is to make sure that you're reading books that you enjoy. Do you like adult books? Do you like YA books, like young adult books? Do you like middle grade books? In general, it's a good idea to know what sort of audience you like to fall under. So if you're somebody that absolutely loved reading when you were younger and really just can't find yourself getting into anything now that you're older, maybe you should read some more YA again. Maybe you should read some more middle grade again. There's no shame in that. Your reading is completely personal to you. Nobody else needs to care about what you're doing. It's your life, it's your reading, it's something that's very personal. So just do what you want. Read what you want. In that same area, you can decide, do you want to read fiction or nonfiction? If you want to read fiction, what kind of genres do you like? Do you like contemporary fiction? Do you like literary romance? Do you like classics? Do you like fantasy, sci-fi, all of these different, there's so many different genres, horror, mystery, whatever you like. A good way to kind of like discover what kind of books you might like is to take a look at what kind of movies you like. Do you like rom-coms? Do you like comedies in general? Do you like horror films? Do you like action films? Do you like movies that take place in different worlds? Do you like movies that take place in your world? Take a second and look at what sort of media you like to consume in general, whether it's movies or shows or whatever. You might find that you like reading books that are similar to those sorts of things. Additionally, it's the same with nonfiction. If you're looking at like a documentary that you like, or say you're listening to the radio or listening to a podcast or something like that, what sort of topics do you like to listen to in that regard? Because those topics may coincide with the type of nonfiction genre you may be interested in, whether it's health or science or self-help or You know, there are so many. There's so many memoirs, history, politics, all of these different things. So take a look at what you consume on a regular basis, and if you're trying to get into reading and trying to pinpoint what sort of reading you might be interested in, those two may parallel, and that's always a good place to start. That said, if you start reading a book and you're not liking it, and you can really tell that like it's just not pulling you in, and you're really trying to like sit down and take that time and it's just not working out, don't be afraid to just put it down. You can DNF the book, which means did not finish. That is okay. When I was living abroad in France last 2 years ago, one of my really good friends, Lucy, was talking to me, and I was talking about reading this book, and I just couldn't get through it. I wasn't loving the writing style. I wasn't loving the topic. It ended up being kind of like completely different from what I thought it was going to be. And I kept telling her like, I just want to move on to the next book, but I can't. I need to finish this. And she looked at me and she was like, why? Why do you need to finish it? You don't like it. I was like, oh, well, like I bought it and like I should. And she was like, stop. If you don't want to read it, don't read it. Just stop reading the book, Kira. It's not a big deal. And for some reason that was revolutionary to me because in my mind it was always like, oh, I spent the money on it, or I'm a very like planning oriented person and a goal oriented person. And I was like, oh, I have to finish it. If I start it, I have to finish it to be able to say that I read it. No, if you read a book and you're not loving it and you're halfway through, even if you're reading a book and you're not loving it and you're 10 pages through, it does not matter. You can say that you read it, you can say that you DNF'd it, you can just not read it. It is not a big deal. Again, just read what you want to read. The third tip here is exactly that. Read what you want to read. Read those books. Don't read what you think you should be reading. Something I hear often in therapy and psychology in general is don't should yourself. Don't should yourself. If you get yourself into so many situations where the only reason you're performing these actions or the only reason you're doing these things is because you feel like you should, don't do that. Just do what you want to do. Should only really works in like, you know, if you should finish your homework because it's due, okay, there's that. If you should go to work because you need to get paid and you might get fired, okay, do that. But if you're thinking like, oh, I should read this book because someone told me to, or because it's popular right now, or because I want people to like me or think that I'm smart or whatever it is, just like delve into that a little bit more. Again, reading is personal to you. Just read what you want to read. I cannot say that enough. I cannot stress that enough. When I was trying to get back into my reading at the beginning of the year, I was really struggling with it. I was like, why can't I get back into reading? I haven't been really interested in a book, not being able to put it down since like almost high school. And I was like, what is going on? And then I realized, oh, it's because I've been reading books that I think I should read. What was I reading when I was in high school and I absolutely loved reading and couldn't put my books down? I was reading contemporary fiction. I was reading YA fantasy books. I was reading sci-fi. And as an adult, I wasn't letting myself read those things. I was like thinking for some reason that nonfiction was the only way to go. And it was just so silly. And I kind of had that epiphany. I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to read what I want to read. And so that's when I jumped into my first Sarah J. Maas book. And let me tell you, Reading Slump, gone. Gonzo, guys. Just read what you want to read. All right, so now that we've got those first 3 tips kind of taken care of, let's get into when you actually want to start reading again, when you want to go into it, when you get into it, how are you going to get yourself to read? So this is sort of similar to what I imagine it's like to kind of like implement other habits into your life. Something that I find to be helpful, at least in the beginning, is schedule a time into your day to read. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to sit down for 2 hours and read 300 pages and all of this stuff. No. Don't do it that way. I think that page numbers are maybe not so great because your reading speed will change with the type of book you're reading. Your reading speed will change with how interested you are. Your reading speed will change with how often you read. The more you read, the quicker you'll be able to read and the better you'll get at comprehension and all of that stuff. It's not about being smart, it's just about practice. And so I think that in the beginning, it's really helpful if you just schedule some time to read. For me, delving back into reading kind of coincided with my spring break this year. So I told myself, okay, every day I'm gonna spend 30 minutes at night before going to bed reading my book. And then if you're getting sleepy, do it in the morning instead. Drink your coffee with a book instead of drinking your coffee while you're on your phone, or instead of drinking your coffee and watching TV. Just read a book instead. Try and replace other habits that you have with reading a book instead and see how that goes. An important thing to keep in mind too is that if you get distracted, it's okay. Just our brains are wired these days to have a very short attention span. Again, it's not like a neurological issue or anything like that. This is talking about the way that social media is run, the way that the internet is run, the way that technology in general has completely changed our attention abilities. So if you're sitting down and you're reading and you're enjoying the book, but for some reason you keep wanting to get up, or you keep wanting to close the book and look around, you keep wanting to grab your phone, you keep wanting to, check in with your friend or whatever, that is normal. You have to sort of retrain your attention to get back into basic focus on reading. So much of our focus these days is passive focus. So if you're watching TV, you don't have to actively focus on it all the time. If you're listening to an audiobook, people often talk about does an audiobook count as reading? In my opinion, it does. I think that it's a little bit discriminatory to those who can't physically read to say that audiobooks are not reading. The one thing that makes it a little bit interesting is that with an audiobook, you can be passively reading, you can be passively listening, meaning you can be doing other things and also be doing this. When you're physically reading, like reading a book, it's a little bit more of an active reading. You have to be actively reading with your eyes, reading the words. You also have to be holding the book, looking at the book. You can't be looking at your phone and also trying to listen to it at the same time. It doesn't really work as well. And so that shift in your mind from passive attention to active attention is gonna be a little bit of a hitch. It's okay. It's something that will come with time. Just be patient with yourself. It might take you an entire 3 months to read one 100-page book. It's okay. It's not about that. It's just about getting into the habit of sitting down and having that time. The next thing that I want to talk about is that in general, when you're trying to get back into reading, if you can't seem to find the right book, sometimes rereads are actually a really good way to go. Say you used to be an avid reader as a kid, and you're remembering, oh, I used to love this book, or I loved this series, or whatever it is. Sometimes rereading childhood favorites can actually be a really, really great way to jump back into reading and kind of kickstart that reading again. In particular, I think that there's a little bit of a line to be sort of balanced on when it comes to rereads. I think that if you're rereading something that you're still very familiar with or that you remember a lot from, it can actually be a little detrimental, because if you remember too much of it, you might not be as interested in figuring it out and discovering it. But if it's a book where you remember loving it, but you don't remember a lot of the details, or you don't remember a lot of the plot, or you read the first chapter and you're like, wow, I actually already realized that I forgot a ton. Those are great books to reread and to get you back into reading, because you know that you'll be interested. The fact that you're going to be actively trying to remember things too creates this new sort of intrigue into the book. And then also, sometimes if you want to read something that's a little bit simpler, like a YA book in general, it's nice, it's easy. Sometimes you need something that you can easily get into, so you don't have to be so focused on your actual reading process or your linguistic abilities or your literary analyses. Sometimes you just need something that's a little bit easy, a little bit fun, and you know that it's going to be good. And so that's why I think that childhood reads can be a really, really great way to sort of re-inspire you to get back into reading. An example of a series that I want to reread is the what's it called? His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. I read those 3 books, The Golden Compass, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass, when I was a kid. And oh my gosh, those books were the books that I was ooh, these, I like reading. This is the thing for me. So I think it would be really, really, really fun to kind of delve back into those this year. I have lots of fond memories of them, but fewer memories of the actual plot. So anyway, just a little example for you guys. Let's see, what do I have next on my little list here? Oh, yes. So the last little tip that I want to mention here is one that I'm sure everybody is tired of hearing, but it really does help if you put your phone in a separate room. I know, but really, if it's just like 30 minutes, put a timer on the stove or the microwave or your watch, or put a timer on your phone and then put it across the room, something like that. If you have 30 minutes, and I did this a lot for myself at the beginning, and it was crazy to see how often I would close my book and reach for my phone on the couch, or close my book and reach for my phone in my pocket, and it wasn't there. And it helps you realize how often you grab for that phone, and it also kind of helps you go, oh, okay, not an option, let's go back to reading. And over time, it'll really just build up your habit of sticking with your reading. And really, again, it goes back to that attention thing. It really, really helps with it. Your reading will become less of a chore. It will become less of something that you have to actively say, I'm going to read now. And it will become more of a comfort. So especially if you're connecting to your books, if you're reading books that you enjoy, at least for me, like, reading is like having my morning cup of coffee. It's like if I don't read during the day, there's something missing, because I really do find it as a comfort. It's not, for me, something like working out where it's like, oh yeah, you feel better once you do it, but it's not always what you want to be doing. Like, I know many of us feel that way. Reading is something where if I don't do it during the day, if I don't do it at some point, if it's been 2 days since I've read anything, it's like a little ache. It's a little ache in your heart, and it gets filled by reading. So just give it time. It probably took me 3 or 4 months for that feeling to come in of that like, oh, I've missed my reading today. So yeah, just be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, reconnect with why you want to be reading. Is it because you would rather be spending time doing something else? Is it because you want to delve back into those stories? Do you need a little escapism for a little while? Really, like, and also just read what you want to read. I'm so over people shaming each other for the kinds of books that they like. If somebody gives a book a 1-star rating and they're like, oh, this is the worst book I ever read, and you read it and you love it, don't be embarrassed by that. Love your books. Love what you love. Who cares? Really, who cares? It's nobody's business. Just read what you want to read, guys. I cannot say that enough. Read what you want to read. Okay, so thanks so much for joining, you guys. Let me know what you thought of the video. I hope you liked it. If you had any experiences or tips that you have always thought were helpful to get you back into reading, I would love to hear about them. Go ahead and comment them below. Let me know if you feel that sort of like itch to read during the day. I would love to know if anybody else feels sort of like a little like there's something missing if they haven't read during the day. And yeah, I hope you loved the video today. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe down below. Let's build this community again. Let's just talk about reading. Let people read what they want to read, okay, guys? Read what you want to read. All right, with that, I'm gonna say goodbye, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.